Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, believed that within every person lies a hidden, often suppressed side, the shadow. This shadow consists of the traits, desires, and emotions we reject, yet it holds the key to deep self-awareness and purpose. By confronting and integrating our shadow, we unlock our true potential and discover a life path aligned with our most authentic self. In this video, we'll explore how understanding your shadow can reveal the deeper meaning of your existence. Jung's concept of the shadow is both a profound and challenging part of his psychological framework. Essentially, it is the collection of parts of ourselves that we either reject, repress, or deny. These are often the qualities we deem undesirable, such as anger, jealousy, selfishness, or fear. The shadow represents a hidden aspect of our personality, often formed by early childhood experiences or societal conditioning that led us to believe certain traits are unacceptable. These repressed traits don't disappear. Instead, they are pushed into the unconscious mind. We develop coping mechanisms and defense strategies to avoid confronting these parts of ourselves. But this doesn't mean they vanish. In fact, the shadow can influence our behavior in subtle, unconscious ways. We may project these rejected traits onto others, seeing them in the people around us without recognizing them in ourselves. For example, someone who has repressed their own anger may constantly accuse others of being angry or irrational, not realizing that these are qualities they themselves harbor but refuse to acknowledge. The shadow's impact is often most noticeable when we experience negative emotional reactions or internal conflicts. When we encounter something that deeply disturbs us or triggers an emotional response, it's worth pausing to ask, is there something in this situation that is reflecting something about ourselves that we are avoiding or denying? Jung suggested that these projections are not random. They are messages from the unconscious, drawing our attention to unresolved aspects of our personality that need to be addressed. In this way, the shadow is not merely an obstacle to be avoided. It is a necessary and valuable part of our inner landscape. Understanding the shadow requires a willingness to explore the parts of ourselves that we find uncomfortable or disturbing. Only by integrating these aspects into our conscious awareness can we become whole, embracing all parts of who we are. When we ignore or repress the shadow, it often sabotages our lives in unexpected ways. One of the most common ways this happens is through self-sabotage. When we don't fully acknowledge our shadow, we act out of alignment with our true desires and values. This misalignment can create an inner tension that manifests in behaviors that undermine our own success or happiness. You might have big dreams, for example, but find yourself consistently procrastinating, avoiding opportunities, or engaging in self-destructive patterns, like substance abuse or toxic relationships. These are signs that the shadow is at work, influencing your actions without your conscious awareness. The shadow can also surface through projections, where we unconsciously attribute our own repressed traits onto others. This creates conflict and misunderstanding in our relationships. We might find ourselves repeatedly angry at someone who displays the same characteristics we dislike about ourselves. In this case, the shadow serves as a mirror, showing us what we are unwilling to accept about ourselves. Furthermore, when we push the shadow down or refuse to confront it, we create a sense of fragmentation within ourselves. The conscious and unconscious parts of our personality become disconnected, leading to feelings of inner conflict and confusion. This disintegration of the self can result in a lack of direction or a sense of aimlessness. We may chase external goals or identities that don't truly align with who we are. trying to fill the emptiness caused by ignoring the shadow. In the process, we lose touch with our true desires, values, and potential. Understanding the shadow is crucial because it forces us to take responsibility for our own actions, behaviors, and feelings, rather than blaming the external world or others. When we face the aspects of ourselves that we've avoided, we stop allowing them to run our lives unconsciously. Only by bringing these hidden parts of our psyche into the light can we begin to reclaim the energy and potential they hold. Jung's idea of the shadow as a source of growth and transformation comes from the recognition that the more we embrace the parts of ourselves we once considered dark or unworthy, the more whole we become. Shadow work is not just about becoming aware of the negative aspects of our psyche. It's about integrating these aspects into our conscious selves and using them for growth. This process often involves confronting uncomfortable truths, but the rewards of self-acceptance, clarity, and a deeper sense of purpose are immense. By acknowledging the shadow, we step into a more authentic and empowered version of ourselves. Through this integration, the shadow ceases to be an enemy. Instead, it becomes a powerful ally in our journey toward personal wholeness and fulfillment. To truly embrace the shadow, we must go beyond simply acknowledging it. We must engage with it, understand it, and integrate it. This is the path to wholeness that Jung spoke of, where we stop seeing the shadow as an enemy or something to fear and start recognizing it as a vital part of our psyche. The first step in this process is to accept that these darker aspects of ourselves are not inherently evil or destructive. They are simply parts of who we are that have been suppressed, often because we were taught to reject them at an early age. Our anger, jealousy, vulnerability, or other negative traits don't make us bad people. They are simply aspects of our humanity that, when left unacknowledged, can cause internal conflict and external harm. When we begin the process of embracing our shadow, it often feels like a confrontation with our deepest fears or insecurities. It can be uncomfortable, painful, and even terrifying at times. But, as Jung suggested, this discomfort is not something to shy away from. It's a necessary part of the journey towards self-realization. By facing these parts of ourselves, we gain the opportunity to learn more about our true desires, motivations, and the patterns that have shaped our behavior throughout our lives. For example, the part of us that we reject because it's seen as weak might be the very source of our compassion and empathy for others. What we consider a flaw in ourselves might be an important strength in disguise. One of the key aspects of shadow work is the process of developing self-compassion. As we begin to look at these darker, repressed parts of ourselves, we are often tempted to judge or criticize ourselves for having them. But it's crucial to approach this process with gentleness and patience. The shadow doesn't emerge out of malice. It emerges as a way of coping with experiences, often from early childhood, when we were unable to express certain emotions or desires freely. By offering ourselves compassion and acceptance, we can begin to heal the wounds that led to the repression of these aspects in the first place. This compassion allows us to forgive ourselves for the mistakes we've made, while also recognizing that our imperfections are what make us whole. In many ways, embracing the shadow is akin to reclaiming our lost power. When we reject parts of ourselves, we inadvertently give away our energy, allowing these repressed traits to unconsciously control us. When we consciously bring them into the light, however, we take back that energy and channel it into more positive, constructive expressions. The anger that was once suppressed can fuel a sense of personal strength, boundaries, and assertiveness. The jealousy that we once ignored can become a powerful motivator for self-improvement and clarity about what we truly want in life. This integration process can also involve re-examining past experiences that contributed to the formation of the shadow. Often we suppress these traits because we were punished, rejected, or shamed for expressing them as children. Maybe we learned that being vulnerable made us weak, or that showing anger would cause others to abandon us. In doing this deep inner work, we allow ourselves to revisit these experiences with the wisdom and perspective of an adult. We can acknowledge the pain we experienced without allowing it to control us anymore. We can forgive ourselves for the ways we've internalized limiting beliefs and free ourselves from the grip of those old wounds. When we fully embrace our shadow, we stop seeing it as something that needs to be conquered or eradicated. Instead, we understand that it is an essential part of our being, one that, when integrated, leads to a more authentic and fulfilled life. In this state of integration, we can approach the world with a sense of wholeness, no longer divided against ourselves. Our relationships, our work, and our sense of purpose become clearer because we are no longer distracted by the internal battles we once fought to deny these parts of ourselves. The integration of the shadow leads to personal transformation, but it's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. As we grow and evolve, new aspects of the shadow may emerge, reflecting new challenges or parts of our psyche that we have yet to fully acknowledge. This process of continual self-awareness and self-acceptance is what allows us to live authentically and with purpose. In fact, embracing the shadow may open up the very path to our deepest purpose in life. The parts of ourselves that we once feared or rejected often hold the key to understanding our deepest desires, strengths, and potential. Our shadow contains hidden talents, passions, and gifts that can be unlocked through the process of integration. These are often the very aspects of ourselves that we were too afraid to express. But once we accept them, we find that they are integral to living a life that aligns with our true self. In this way, embracing the darkness within us becomes a pathway to light. Through the process of shadow work, we not only confront our deepest fears, but also rediscover our capacity for growth, transformation, and fulfillment. When we stop running from ourselves and start embracing all of who we are, we uncover the potential to live a more authentic, purposeful life. One that is not based on the false ideals of society or the expectations of others, but on the true essence of who we were meant to be. Shadow work is not just about acknowledging the darker aspects of ourselves. It's about actively engaging with them to understand their deeper significance and harness their potential. This process is incredibly valuable because often our greatest challenges point directly to the hidden parts of ourselves that hold the key to our life's purpose. When we look closely at the areas where we struggle or feel blocked, we start to see that these difficulties are not random. They are often reflections of unconscious desires, unfulfilled needs, or suppressed potentials that are trying to make themselves known. For instance, a person who feels constantly frustrated in their career or personal relationships might be unknowingly avoiding a deeper calling or passion that lies dormant within them. The shadow often speaks through these frustrations, showing us where we have strayed from our true path. By examining the roots of our dissatisfaction, we can start to uncover the deeper motivations and longings that have been buried beneath the surface. Take, for example, someone who has been in a job for years but feels unfulfilled. They might feel resentment toward their colleagues or boss, yet they continue to stay in the position, telling themselves that they need the security or that it's too late to change. Upon diving deeper into the shadow, they might discover that the real issue isn't the job itself, but their fear of failure, their lack of confidence, or their deep-seated belief that they don't deserve to pursue something they love. These unconscious beliefs are the shadow's influence. They are the parts of themselves that have been repressed or ignored, and they are subtly shaping the way the person approaches their life. By acknowledging and confronting these beliefs, they open themselves to the possibility of change, and in doing so, they begin to uncover their true purpose. Shadow work can also reveal the talents and strengths we never realized we had. Many of us have deeply ingrained ideas about who we are based on our upbringing or societal expectations. We might believe that we are not creative, not capable, or not deserving of success because we have internalized messages from others or from past experiences. These beliefs limit our potential, preventing us from stepping into a life that is aligned with our authentic desires. But when we confront the shadow, we start to see that these limitations are not absolute truths. They are merely stories we have been telling ourselves. The truth is that we are much more capable than we give ourselves credit for, and we have talents and abilities that we have suppressed out of fear or self-doubt. The shadow work process helps us break free from these limiting beliefs and rediscover the vast reservoir of untapped potential within us. Often, what the shadow reveals is not just a buried talent or desire, but a calling or purpose that we have been avoiding out of fear, guilt, or insecurity. We may have known for a long time that we are meant to be doing something more meaningful with our lives, but we have been too afraid to act on it. This fear often comes from the shadow, the part of ourselves that believes we are unworthy of success or happiness, or that pursuing our dreams will result in failure or rejection. But when we confront these fears directly, we realize that they are not grounded in reality. They are simply remnants of old wounds or unresolved emotional pain. By working with the shadow, we give ourselves permission to step into our true power and purpose. This can be a deeply liberating experience as we begin to see that our life's purpose is not something that is separate from us or outside of our control, but something that is embedded in our very being. It has always been there, waiting for us to uncover it. The struggles, challenges, and repressed desires we've experienced are not obstacles to our purpose. They are the very material from which our purpose is formed. Our purpose is not something we need to go out and find. It's something we need to uncover within ourselves through self-awareness and integration. The more we engage with our shadow and the deeper we go into the process of self-discovery, the clearer our life's purpose becomes. We begin to see that the struggles we've faced have been guiding us toward this moment of realization. They were never just obstacles. They were markers, pointing us in the direction of the life we are meant to live. The person who has struggled with self-doubt might discover that their true calling involves helping others overcome their own insecurities. The person who has spent years feeling disconnected from their emotions might realize that they are meant to work with others in the healing arts, bringing emotional awareness and balance into people's lives. It's important to remember that the process of shadow work is not always a smooth or linear one. The deeper we go into the unconscious, the more we may encounter parts of ourselves that are difficult to face. But rather than seeing these parts as barriers to our purpose, we can reframe them as opportunities for growth. Every time we integrate a new aspect of our shadow, we gain clarity about our true purpose, and each step forward brings us closer to living a life that is deeply fulfilling and authentic. The purpose revealed through shadow work is not some abstract, distant goal. It is a living, breathing part of who we are. It is the expression of our truest self, and it is often much more aligned with our natural inclinations and passions than we realize. When we stop resisting or fearing the shadow, we begin to see that our purpose is not something we need to strive for, but something we need to allow to unfold naturally. The work of integrating the shadow is not about changing who we are. It is about uncovering who we truly are, beneath all the layers of conditioning, fear, and self-doubt. In doing so, we step into a life of greater authenticity, fulfillment, and joy, where our actions are aligned with our deepest desires and values. As we continue to embrace and integrate the shadow, we come to realize that the path to purpose is not something we walk alone. It is something we uncover within ourselves, and it is already guiding us every step of the way. Living in harmony with our true self is the culmination of the long, often difficult process of shadow work. It is the point at which we have fully embraced and integrated the darker, repressed parts of ourselves and stopped fighting against our own nature. This integration allows us to live a life that is not only more authentic, but also one that feels whole, balanced, and meaningful. When we no longer feel divided against ourselves, when we no longer suppress, deny, or run away from parts of our psyche, we are able to access a deep sense of inner peace and clarity. In many ways, living in harmony with our true self means learning to accept ourselves fully without judgment or condemnation. It means recognizing that we are complex beings, full of contradictions, and that this complexity is part of what makes us uniquely human. There is no need to fit ourselves into a mold or conform to others' expectations. Instead, we begin to honor our uniqueness, our desires, our strengths, and even our weaknesses. Through shadow work, we've come to see that none of these parts of ourselves are inherently bad or unworthy. They are all essential components of the whole person we are meant to be. This acceptance of all parts of ourselves is not passive. It is an active, ongoing process of cultivating self-compassion. We've all been taught, either explicitly or implicitly, to reject certain aspects of our nature. Society, culture, and family can all impose ideals and standards that make us feel as if we must be perfect, constantly striving for a version of ourselves that is more acceptable or more correct. The truth is that these external pressures often create a disconnect between who we are and who we think we should be. This tension leads to feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. When we live in harmony with our true self, we stop trying to meet external expectations and start living in alignment with our inner truth. Living authentically means that we are no longer bound by the need to conform or seek validation from others. We stop trying to be someone we are not in order to gain approval or avoid rejection. Instead, we begin to make decisions based on our own values, desires, and aspirations. This doesn't mean we ignore others or become selfish. It simply means that we no longer compromise who we are to fit into someone else's idea of what we should be. We begin to trust ourselves, our instincts, and our ability to create the life we truly want. We no longer fear making mistakes or stepping off the beaten path, because we know that every step, even the missteps, is a part of our personal growth and evolution. Living in harmony with our true self also involves the cultivation of deep emotional intelligence. As we integrate the shadow, we become more aware of our emotions and how they influence our behavior. Rather than repressing or ignoring difficult feelings, we learn to sit with them, understand them, and use them as guides for growth. Emotions like anger, fear, and sadness are often seen as obstacles or signs of weakness, but they are, in fact, powerful indicators of what is happening inside us. When we live in harmony with our true self, we stop resisting our emotions and instead learn from them. We recognize that our emotional experiences are not something to be ashamed of, but something to be honored. They provide us with valuable insight into what we need, what we value, and what we want to change in our lives. This emotional awareness extends to our relationships as well. When we embrace our true selves, we are better able to connect with others on a deeper level. We stop projecting our unresolved issues onto them and stop trying to control or manipulate the dynamics of our interactions. Instead, we approach others with compassion and openness, recognizing that they too are complex individuals with their own shadows. This leads to more authentic, fulfilling relationships, where both parties can be their true selves without fear of judgment or rejection. At the same time, living in harmony with our true self involves setting healthy boundaries. Boundaries are an essential part of self-care, and when we integrate the shadow, we become more aware of where our boundaries have been violated in the past. We also learn to identify situations and relationships that drain our energy or undermine our sense of self-worth. Rather than continuing to tolerate these situations out of obligation or fear of conflict, we begin to set boundaries that honor our needs and desires. We learn to say no when necessary and yes when it aligns with our values. By doing so, we create the space for more meaningful connections and experiences that truly support our growth. Living in harmony with our true self also requires a level of acceptance and surrender. There are always going to be aspects of life that are beyond our control, and part of the integration process is learning to let go of the need to control everything. This doesn't mean giving up on our goals or dreams, but rather it means trusting the process and allowing life to unfold in its own time. The more we let go of the need to force outcomes, the more we begin to experience a sense of flow and ease in our lives. We learn to work with life rather than against it, and in doing so, we create more opportunities for growth and fulfillment. One of the most profound aspects of living in harmony with our true self is the sense of inner peace that comes from accepting who we are, as we are. We stop the constant striving for approval or perfection, and instead, we become grounded in our own sense of worth. This inner peace radiates outward, affecting every aspect of our lives. Our relationships improve, our work becomes more meaningful, and we feel a sense of contentment and fulfillment that comes from simply being who we are. We no longer feel the need to prove ourselves or seek validation from others. We know that we are enough, just as we are. Ultimately, living in harmony with our true self means living authentically and courageously. It means embracing the fullness of our humanity, the light and the dark, and trusting that we are capable of creating a life that is deeply aligned with our purpose. The journey of shadow work is never truly finished, but when we integrate the shadow, we begin to experience life in a way that feels whole and expansive. We move beyond the limitations of fear and self-doubt and step into a life of greater freedom, authenticity, and joy. Through this process, we uncover the deep well of strength, wisdom, and love that lies within us, and we find ourselves living a life that is not just our own, but one that is fully in tune with the universe's greater flow.